Hello everyone and welcome to the Civic Spectrum, and today we're going to do a deep dive into the 2022 Senate elections. See who was really at fault, see what happened, and see how they all defied the conventional wisdom of what we normally expect from a midterm. Every time any party in this country underperforms, it really does start to threaten their status quo. These coalitions are very, I guess you could say, fragile in the sense when you look at stuff like how the Tea Party was able to take control in the early 2010s through the Republicans and the more socialist Bernie style Democrats who came up after 2016. And while this isn't something that's new to the United States, it's something that seems to be happening more and more as majority for the control for both the House and the Senate are razor thin, and they keep getting closer and closer. Looking just at the Senate, for the last entire legislative session, 50-50 with a tiebreaker vote just to get anything done, and nothing really did get done. And that's a huge problem here, because the latest great divide going into the 22 midterm was just how confident Republicans were. When you go look at the polling, what was being said on stuff like Fox News, Republicans in the House talking about this red tsunami, 50 plus seat majority, talking about a 54 seat majority in the Senate, and in the end, there was barely enough, people elected in the House to get the 218 needed. They only won the popular vote by 3 points. The Senate didn't fare any better either, with some people being able to argue that Republicans had an advantage across the board, only needing to hold the 50 seats they had, and just picking up one seat when there were like 4 to 5 battlegrounds. Republicans have this huge problem though, because this map is at odds with everything we know about midterms when it comes into the party that's in the opposition, as the current president is treading water. His approval rating currently is below, probably below 40, around the 40s. He's the only president at this point in time that he's ahead of for approval is Jimmy Carter. And we know how his presidency ended. The GOP had this huge unmitigated disaster, and honestly, this huge structural decay within the leadership of the party needs to be addressed. While many people want to look back and point fingers at just one or two individuals for these losses, it's wrong to only put the blame on them. But no one's innocent with all of this. The GOP does not clearly understand how this happened or how to fix it, but they'll keep failing time and time again because they're wanting to become this regional party that does nothing for the actual voters. So let's start by listing off who made these mistakes, retroactively, so we can do better in the future. Because everyone makes mistakes, Donald Trump, the national GOP. But the problem is when you look at those mistakes, and then you just don't do anything to change it. Trump isn't the only one that can be blamed. No matter how loud certain groups want to, yell, oh, a lot of his backed candidates didn't win, which that's just not true. You can also look at the GOP establishment and its messaging. The GOP's chief campaign manager said multiple times, let's keep running on linking Democrats to socialism, because that worked out so well against Biden. It's worked out so well in the last 30 years that it was just such a good strategy. And it wasn't effective in the 2020 race, ad after ad against Joe Biden being a communist didn't land, and the voters reflected that. Even with their own 2020 autopsy that the GOP did, they acknowledged that they didn't focus on household issues. And there was no policy. Even now, what's the substantive policy for the GOP? They're still struggling. The GOP has spent the better half of the last 2 decades just fumbling around, doing nothing. When it came to stuff like, a better solution for Obamacare, stubbornness to really bring forward any major wins since 2018, it really put a lot of doubt in most voters, especially GOP voters. This map here, you can just go back to 2022 and you can see that, the stress marks were already there, and that bled into 2022. So let's start looking at some of these Senate races. I would say there's 4 we're going to look at that were the highest competitive, had the highest chance for the GOP to win if they would have just did a little bit more and actually cared about winning. So let's look at the first state here, Nevada. Now, Nevada is a really interesting one because Adam Laxalt was probably the best candidate for Nevada. He lost by less than only around 10,000 votes. Honestly, he's the only candidate the GOP could find in Nevada to probably be able to get these numbers up. And he probably would have won if he would have just got a little more of Trump's rural vote out, as well as, had more money. which is a huge issue you're going to see across all four of these states we're going to talk about. The GOP just gets outfunded, like not even like just by a little bit. We're talking about like crazy comical numbers that shouldn't even be a thing. This can be like our first state, let's say, where there's a lot of red flags that really do need to be addressed. The Adam Laxalt campaign was able to get within striking distance with these massive disadvantages. Like, when you look at the actual vote counts, right? He only lost by about 10,000 when he was outspent by like almost 2 to 3 to 1. With Catherine being able to have $64 million on hand that she spent, Adam Laxalt only had 18 mil. We go just a little south to Arizona. It's a little bit of a different story. Mark Kelly won by almost 5 points when, honestly, a lot of people thought it'd be way closer. Blake Master, who was a national GOP candidate, soured for a lot of people. His main issue was that instead of trying to, appeal to these McCain-esque Republicans in his state, he went for more of like the libertarian vote, wanted to go more right-wing. And especially in Arizona, that should have been something they already acknowledged, just they shouldn't have done. The GOP's whole messaging in this area was problematic as, he slipped up and wanted to talk about cutting Social Security of all things in Arizona. That probably just cost him majorly. But again, another huge issue. Let's look at the funding numbers. Mark Kelly spent $89 million this race. Blake Masters, 14 mil. So far, adding up Blake Masters and Adam Laxalt, we don't even come close to getting like on par with either of these candidates so far. The closest one you could probably say, funding-wise, but was still a national embarrassment because it was a flip, was Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz went against John Fetterman, and he also lost by 5 points, a recurring theme. This is a state that I think would have been actually easy layup for a GOP if someone like Sean Parnell would have been the elected nominee to run. But, you can't really just say, I think someone else would win in this place, because the voters reflected they wanted Dr. Oz, and this is what we got. There are three major things that I think really affected the Oz campaign. But the first of that being that the Fetterman campaign was actually really able to dig in with the notion that he was a carpetbagger, didn't really live in the state, didn't know anything, wasn't for the working class. And you can actually see that a lot of the turnout for the Oz campaign, this major depression in rural areas of Trump voters. The next huge one I would say is that it's really hard to be able to pinpoint it, but the GOP governor candidate, Mastriano, is also believed to have massively influenced a downturn in the turnout because of some of his policies. I would say that the hugest issue is that Dr. Oz has a lot of left-wing social ideas. Like if you have to go out and vote, are you going to vote for the person who's left-wing, or are you going to vote for the person who's left-wing-esque with maybe some slight issues where, they're right-wing? You're not going to vote at all because no one there's there to actually represent you. I would say this election can really be blamed on Oz and the Pennsylvania GOP for just not finding someone more populist and aligned with the ideas of their voters. They should have been able to find someone in Pennsylvania that was really able to bring that, charisma. I would say the last huge state that was an issue, that was a really huge sore point, is Georgia, where Herschel Walker, while he did do better than most other states, only losing by 3 points to Raphael Warnock in the runoff election, Herschel had a lot of problems as well. One of these being that the GOP thought that they had this golden goose that many people in the state, had these fond memories of, football player. And his campaign really did run as just like a generic, GOP candidate by most standards. But the main issue for him as well is that two things. One, the Walker campaign had lots of scandals, around how many kids he had, supposed abortions that he covered up, the fact that he might have, advanced CTE, how that will affect him if he was in the Senate for 6 years. And then the one big issue that all four of these have had, more funding issues, being outspent 3 to 1. This race could have been what you could probably say as Walker's fault, because the more I look at it, this race, maybe you can also say it's Trump's fault, because this is one of those states where Walker wouldn't have probably won the primary without Trump's endorsement. Because he wanted to go into Georgia personally and clear out, the people he deemed as rhinos. Because he wanted to more clean out the House of Georgia, get more loyalists in there. And this is the only state you can probably say really would be his fault. And I would say at the end of the day, looking at these 4 races, you can really see that Trump did put his name and influence behind half of these candidates in their primaries. He drastically altered some of these races. However, you cannot ignore these massive, massive funding issues because of Mitch McConnell and the GOP were widespread. How do you have 4 Senate campaigns that don't even add up to one of these candidates for the DNC? I just don't understand it. The GOP and Trump need to communicate better and spin better if they want to survive in this climate and not be relegated to this regional political party on fringe issues. I would say that the hugest issue going into the 2024 election is that I don't know if this map has really shown anything for, the GOP to learn their mistakes. We just look at 538 really quick. They went into this thinking, a lead with Oz, lead with Walker, pretty close, with Blake Masters, and, neck and neck in Nevada. And what they have to show for it in the end is they just didn't want to spend money in these places where they thought they already had an advantage. And it really goes to show that I don't think the GOP's national party cares. But at some point, they're going to have to, have this discussion with the voters, or it's just going to go downhill from here. So alrighty, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Don't forget to comment. Let me know who you personally blame for the Senate disaster of 2022. And sometime in the future, we're going to be getting out, the governorships, as well as the super lackluster House results. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day.